Most people in their early 60s are working all the way to 65 just to avoid a healthcare bill that their portfolio could probably handle. In today's retirement challenge video, we're putting a real world example to the test. A couple with about $1 million saved, 60 years old, house is paid off, but they're terrified to retire before 65 because of insurance. I'm going to show you how it works and how they can get there sooner. My name's Antonio, I'm a financial advisor, and today we're going to run their numbers and show you the one trade that might let you stop working years earlier than you think, and that it costs less than you think that it does. Let me introduce you to a very familiar couple. We're going to call them Mark and Lisa. As always, we've used Mark and Lisa as an example before. Not real people. We've changed stuff so we can put it out here. They're both 60 years old. The house is paid off. They got no debt. They live a pretty modest lifestyle. They spend like $5,000 a month after taxes to cover their normal day-to-day bills. They've done a good job of saving. They got about $1 million put away between their retirement accounts, a small brokerage account. And when I meet them, they say the same thing I hear from people all the time. Antonio, we're thinking maybe we'll retire at 65. We'd love to go right now, but healthcare, we just can't afford it. In their minds, 65 equals a safe retirement date because Medicare kicks in and they don't have to worry about what health insurance will cost before then. They don't want to blow up everything they've worked for over medical costs that seem unknown. And honestly, the fear makes total sense emotionally. But when we look under the hood, what they're really doing is trading 5 of their best, healthiest years of life to avoid a bill they've never actually put real numbers around. And so let's do that. Let's put some real numbers around it and see what it does to things. Now, before we get into the math, let me give you a way to kind of think about this. Imagine your working years and your retirement years are a beautiful pasture separated by a big river going right down the middle. On the far side of the river is life from 60 to 65, the trips you want to take while your knees still cooperate and you got all the energy in the world. The mornings where you want to drink coffee and sit on the porch, not because you need coffee to get awake for the first meeting. The time spent with the grandkids while they're still little and doing all of the fun stuff. And the bridge across that river has a big sign at the entrance and it says toll, health insurance. Now, most people look at that and they're like, wow, we can't afford that. That's going to be too expensive. We'll just hang out over here for a while and we'll keep working until we don't have to pay the toll. What almost nobody does is stop and ask, wait a second, like, how much is the actual toll compared to everything that we have? And that's what we're doing today. We're going to walk up to the toll booth. We're going to ask the price and we're going to see if it makes sense to pay it sooner and buy those 5 years back instead of waiting until it magically becomes free at 65. Let's get back to Mark and Lisa. They need healthcare from 60 to 65 if they want to go early. And so let's keep this very simple and talk in round numbers based on what I've seen with clients. Now, your specifics will certainly vary, but we're going to assume that they need $15,000 a year to cover the healthcare costs, premiums, out-of-pockets, things like that. Depending upon where you are in the country, the numbers may vary, maybe a little higher or lower. You can do the math for yourself. Over 5 years for them, that means $75,000. That means they got to spend $75,000 to buy back those 5 years. Now, that's certainly not nothing, but let's have a little context here. In this case, as I said, they've got roughly $1 million invested. And so the trade we're talking about is, would you give up 7% of your nest egg to buy back 5 more years of retirement? And then question number 2, is there still enough nest egg left to fund the day-to-day life for those 5 years until you're back to the starting point of if you'd have just worked for 5 more years? Most people have never really thought about it that way. They only see, well, healthcare is expensive and I'll have to spend more money during those 5 years because I won't be working. And so this is scary and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But if you zoom out, it looks a lot less like a disaster and a little bit more like something that you might actually choose to do. Now, it's not always that simple. We have to look at how the $75,000 fits into the rest of the plan, but this is where our retirement paycheck plan comes in. And so for Mark and Lisa, here's something else that helps them. They don't live an extravagant life. They're not out there taking hot air balloon rides around the world. Once Social Security kicks in for them, they're going to have about $4,000 a month. And those 2 checks will cover most of their basic lifestyle. And so the issue here is that a lot of folks will discount exactly how much Social Security can mean, especially if you have very reasonable spending needs. And so what ends up happening there is that people draw far less from their portfolio than they think that they will once those Social Security checks are coming in and the money's just kind of sitting there and growing quietly in the background when it could have been used to buy back those 5 years. What we're doing here is we're planning to use some of that money now, early. We're going to spend it to build a bridge to early retirement, both for the healthcare costs and the early income. So let's get some math to it and put this thing together so you can see how it works. First up, let's look at the Social Security. For Mark, benefits around $2,700 at age 67 if he waits that long. If he takes it as early as possible, it's like $1,900 a month. For Lisa, the numbers aren't too different. $2,500 at 67 at full retirement age, $1,750 at 62. Now, we can talk about Social Security claiming strategy. What you're trying to do in an example like this is get some money moving early before you draw down your portfolio too aggressively, and then preserve a lifetime benefit that's a little bit larger for a survivor. And so in this case, we can't carry the load for income for the full 7 years without running things too tight. So what we're going to do is Lisa kicks on at 62, gets some of that money for the $5,000 a month they need to live flowing, and we'll defer Mark's benefit potentially to 67 to lock in that permanent survivor benefit, as well as to lessen the load on the portfolio. Now, I say potentially 67 because each year from 62 on, this is something we're going to retest to see how investment performance is doing, how the portfolio is holding up. But the expectation is if things go according to plan, we can wait for Mark until 67. And at that point, they'd have around $4,400 a month coming in before taxes from Social Security. Even after covering future Medicare premiums, taxes that are going to be due, they're going to be getting a lot of the $5,000 per month they need right off the bat from Social Security once we get to that point. So really the risk is early on, how do we get to that point before things can sort of go on autopilot? Now, here's another common misconception with that. What we're doing is solving a relatively short income need, very heavy from the portfolio, very earlier on in retirement, but we don't have to solve that need for the entire 30 plus years of retirement. A lot of times people will take what they need to spend early and go like, oh, I can't sustain that. You don't have to sustain it. You just have to do it in the beginning until everything else kicks in. So the real planning question here is, can we build a retirement paycheck that covers the gap before Social Security and Medicare without draining the portfolio so much that it hurts the rest of the plan and all of the future years? That's the trade that you've got to figure out. I'm going to show you the math in a second. Now, quick pause here because this is exactly the kind of planning that I do all day. If you're watching this and you're thinking, this kind of sounds like me. Decent saver, we've put away some good money. We're not living wild. We're not crazy spenders, but we're kind of glued to 65 because we never really thought about whether we could go sooner. You want somebody to help you figure out if you can, whether the trade makes sense for you. That's literally what we do. We'll help you build a clear vision retirement plan for yourself. Go on down to the description. You can click a link, set up a time to chat with me. I'll go over things with you and we'll see what we can do to get you going on a path to early retirement. All right, back to Mark and Lisa. Let me show you how to build out the plan. With most of my clients, we don't just go like, 75,000 is only 7% of the portfolio, you're fine. We put it into a structure so it doesn't feel like a blind gamble. Think of your investments in 3 buckets. Bucket number 1, cash and short-term money to fund retirement through years 1 through 5. This is your paycheck now bucket. It's your early retirement freedom fund, and it lives in investments that don't fluctuate a whole lot. Cash, high yield savings, money markets, maybe short-term CDs. And in this case, it's where the healthcare toll also lives, along with those basic living expenses for the first few years. I'll show you the math on how we're going to build it out in just a second. But first, bucket number 2. This is income money for years 5 through 10. Things like bonds, dividend payers, maybe an annuity if it's right for you. Stuff that's designed to refill bucket 1 over time and give you a predictable long-term retirement paycheck. And bucket number 3, that's your long-term growth money. Money that you're not going to touch for 10 plus years after you retire. This is the money that gets to ride the stock market roller coaster because you don't need it right away. And we've built a 10-year moat before we have to touch it. So it's there for future growth, inflation protection, all of those things. For Mark and Lisa, the $75,000 healthcare bridge is part of bucket 1. It's not a surprise. We plan for it. We literally build a healthcare fund. Bucket number 1. $75,000 to cover the healthcare costs, and income to cover the first 5 years of the plan. That's another $255,000 or so, depending upon the interest rates we can get. So all in, bucket one is $330,000. That's their bridge to 5 years of early retirement freedom. Bucket number two, by the time we get to this piece of money, we've got a very light income lift, because remember, we've got both the Social Security checks kicking in here very soon. And at that point, even adjusting for inflation and taxes, we're looking at a very minimal draw for income. So really it becomes about risk tolerance. If they want to really build up the retirement paycheck, we can load up on income producing assets here. If they want to preserve as much bucket three future growth money as possible, we can go a little bit lighter here. In this case, they're fine with that. So bucket two is going to be light in their example. Around $150,000 is going to go there. And then bucket number three, future growth money, we've still got, if you followed me with the math, $480,000 sitting here, and a likelihood that we've got at a minimum 10 plus years before we're going to touch any of that money. With decent investment returns, it should grow to be quite a bit more before then. And remember, once we get through that early bridge window, we don't need very much income. So there's still plenty of cushion here, even though they used a lot of money up front. Now the trade is clear. They're not going to blow up their retirement plan to pay for healthcare. They're carving off a known slice of a substantial portfolio to buy back 5 years of freedom. Think about that with me for a second. If somebody told you you can give up 7% of your portfolio to buy back 5 years, would you do it? Now, to be fair, there are other parts of their plan that we didn't cover. We've got to protect against the loss of a Social Security check too soon. We've got to consider planning for long-term care expenses. We've got to build out their tax plan. There's more to it than what we can solve in like a 10-minute YouTube video, but there's definitely a path to retiring much sooner than they thought, and all of the freedom that comes along with it. And that's hard to put a dollar amount on. Now, this is not cheap. I understand that. But if you're sitting there and you've got 800,000, $1 million, $1.5 million saved, and you don't have particularly high expenses, or you've got some really strong retirement income sources coming, this is a trade that is seriously worth examining. Let's turn this into something actionable. Here's a 3-step test you can use to see if the trade will work for you. Step number one, know your real monthly number. This is where almost everybody guesses. What you need to know is, what does it actually cost you to live each month in retirement? And I mean it, don't guess. It's wild when I talk to people and they go like, I don't know, I think maybe 3,000, 4,000. Then I give them a little homework. They come back, they're like, we spend $9,000 a month. They're way off. This is stuff like the mortgage, the property taxes, what you spend at restaurants, what you need to live. For Mark and Lisa, it was about $5,000 a month. Here's your pro tip. Go onto your bank account, download 6 to 12 months of activity, and start looking at what you spend. It's probably going to be more than you think, but it still may be workable. And then move on to number two once you have that number. Map your future Social Security and your other sources of income. Get a rough idea of what's going to be coming in. Use your SSA.gov account or your most recent Social Security statement. Estimate what each of you would get at the time that you're likely to file. And then ask yourself, once both those checks are coming, or if you got a pension, once that's turned on, how much of your monthly spending is actually going to be covered? If those sources of income cover 70% or more of your basic monthly needs, and you've got a reasonable portfolio, chances are good the portfolio is not going to have to do as much lifting as you think that it will, and you might be on the right track. Now, if those sources cover 20 or 25 or 30% of your portfolio, you're going to need more from your investments, and the healthcare trade deserves an extra careful look. Step number three, price the healthcare toll as a percentage of your portfolio. Do a little bit of looking around on what it's going to cost you and figure out how much of the total pie is that. For Mark and Lisa, this was a 7.5% of their portfolio decision. Ask yourself this, once you have that number, is it worth giving up X% of our money to buy back X number of years of our life between now and 65? There's no universal right answer, but for a lot of people in their late 50s or early 60s who've saved diligently, the answer is, I didn't realize the toll was that small. And that's the moment that they automatically stop just anchoring to 65 as their retirement date. Now, a quick reality check. If you got very little saved for retirement, the toll might be too high. You definitely want a pro to run your numbers before you dive in. So Don't just YOLO on into work tomorrow and quit because you watched the video. But what I am saying is, if you've put away some pretty nice money and you live reasonably, and the only thing keeping you still working is the idea that healthcare is unaffordable, it might be time to see the trade clearly, to put some math on it, to see if it's a decision that's worth making, to hit the exit sooner and start enjoying that retirement freedom. If you found the video valuable, subscribe. I mean it. Come back. That does a lot of good things. We've got lots of great content on the channel here for you, and it also tells the big YouTube computer in the sky that this is a good video and it's a nice channel, which helps other people find it as well. If you want to keep learning and see one of these scenarios in action, I've got another peek behind the curtain for you right over here.